The tension inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse wasn't just about basketball. It was about integrity, fairness, and the feeling that something much darker was unfolding beneath the surface of what should have been a pure playoff battle. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White stood before the cameras, her voice trembling with a kind of frustration that only builds when effort and sacrifice are erased by bias. "I think it's pretty egregious what's been happening to us the last few games," she said, her tone cutting through the noise like a blade. "A -31 free throw discrepancy. And I might be able to understand it if we were just chucking threes. But we're not. We're attacking the rim. And the disrespect right now for our team has been pretty unbelievable." That single statement didn't just summarize a game, it ignited a firestorm. Because this wasn't about one bad call or a missed whistle. This was about a series that had gone from competitive to compromised, and a coach who'd finally had enough of pretending the system was fair. The Indiana Fever versus the Las Vegas Aces wasn't a basketball series anymore. It was a heist, broadcast in real time for the world to see. Indiana's journey into the semifinal matchup had been nothing short of defiant. They weren't supposed to be here, a young team built around rising stars, scratching and clawing against the league's powerhouse. When they stunned the Aces by stealing Game 1 in Las Vegas, it felt like a shift in the balance of power. A changing of the guard. But the celebration didn't last long. Because the moment Indiana dared to win, the rules of engagement seemed to change overnight. From Game 2 onward, it wasn't just the Aces on the floor, it was the referees too. The whistles came early, came often, and always seemed to fall the same way. Each drive, each contest, each loose ball seemed to be judged by a different standard depending on the jersey color. Fans saw it. Analysts noticed it. Even the box score screamed it. 31 more free throws for Vegas. 31. The kind of gap you only see when one team spends the night diving recklessly into the lane and the other sits back firing threes. But the Fever weren't living on the perimeter. They were attacking. They were driving. They were earning contact. And yet, they were being punished for daring to compete. In the post-game presser, White tried to stay composed. But the exhaustion in her eyes told the story. "It's disappointing," she admitted, "that it doesn't go both ways. But we can't allow that to consume us. We've got to play through it. We've got to control what we can control." Her words were calm, but her tone carried the weight of someone fighting against more than just a scoreboard. From the opening tip of Game 2, it was obvious where the tide was flowing. Las Vegas couldn't find rhythm, so the refs handed them one. A phantom foul here, a questionable charge there. Every time Indiana built momentum, a whistle snuffed it out. Their defense, physical but clean, was rebranded as reckless. Meanwhile, Vegas's elbows, shoves, and over-the-back grabs were invisible. The Aces were allowed to play football. The Fever were punished for breathing too close. It wasn't subtle. It was blatant. Asked after the game why her team struggled to find a rhythm, White didn't hesitate. "It's hard for us to find flow when there's a foul called every 10 seconds, she said. "When they're at the free throw line, we can't get up and down the floor. Offense is about rhythm, timing, spacing. We allowed them to take that from us." It wasn't an excuse. It was a fact. By Game 3, the imbalance had grown into something undeniable. The referees weren't just part of the story, they were the story. The moment that defined it all came midway through the third quarter. Indiana was clinging to a hard-earned lead when Aaliyah Boston, the team's defensive anchor, was called for a questionable foul on Jackie Young. Stephanie White immediately signaled for a review. The bench rose, ready to challenge. The crowd roared for accountability. And then, nothing. The officials pretended not to see. They refused to acknowledge the request. Seconds later, play continued, and Chelsea Gray buried a three-pointer that flipped the game's momentum. Gainbridge Fieldhouse erupted, not in celebration, but in disbelief. Fans who'd been cheering moments earlier were now raining down boos there. Frustration echoing through every section. Within minutes, the clip was viral online. Analysts slowed it down frame by frame. They pointed out not just the missed review but the string of invisible fouls that had preceded it. Asia Wilson pushing off. Boston being hacked on the glass. No whistle. But when Indiana so much as touched a jersey, immediate foul. The pattern was clear. The question now was why. Social media called it what it was. Rigged. Fans compiled highlight reels, comparing identical plays called differently depending on the uniform. A push from Wilson? Play on. A hand check from Boston? Instant foul. A shoulder shove from an ace? Ignore it. A bump from a Fever guard? Blow the whistle. Over and over, the evidence piled up. Yet, through the chaos, something remarkable emerged: defiance. Because no matter how many whistles tried to break them, Indiana refused to fold. And no one embodied that more than Lexi Hull. Hull had every reason to sit out. A painful back injury from Game 1 had left her barely able to move during warm-ups. She was listed as questionable every night, her body clearly struggling. But when the Fever needed her, she didn't hesitate. And what followed wasn't just a performance, it was a statement. 16 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal, all while shooting 60% from the floor. Every bucket she hit felt like an act of rebellion. Each three-pointer landed like a gut punch to Vegas's supposed invincibility. She tied the Fever's playoff record for threes in consecutive games, doing it on sheer willpower. When she spoke after the game, her voice was humble. "I'm just trying to defend as hard as I can," she said. "That's all I can really say." But those who watched knew it was more than defense. It was defiance. Her performance wasn't about stats. It was about moments. Diving for loose balls. Fighting through screens. Standing tall against players twice her size. Cameras caught her grimacing through pain, yet she never stopped moving. Every time the refs tried to bury Indiana's momentum, Hull dug them out. Her threes were oxygen. Her hustle was hope. The Gainbridge crowd rallied behind her. They saw the pain etched on her face, the way she limped between plays but refused to quit. Each rebound, each stop, reignited the building. Even when the whistles tried to silence them, Hull's grit kept the noise alive. She became the symbol of everything the Fever stood for: heart, resilience, and an unbreakable will to compete. But that's what made it hurt even more. On the same night Lexi Hull delivered the game of her life, the conversation wasn't about her heroics. It was about the officials. It was about the calls that never came, the reviews that never happened, the bias that overshadowed brilliance. Her performance, one that should have been celebrated across the league, was buried beneath controversy. That contrast, between players earning it and others being handed it, told the whole story. On one side, you had Hull dragging her team through pain, giving everything she had. On the other, you had A'ja Wilson, the league's reigning MVP, going silent for most of the game, only to be saved by a steady stream of whistles that erased her mistakes. Wilson's night was a masterclass in inefficiency. She started strong, drilling a three on the opening possession, but it was all downhill from there. By halftime, she was 1 for 11. By the end, she'd shot just 6 for 13 points on 20 attempts. For any other player, that's a benching. For Wilson, it became another chapter in a carefully protected narrative. The irony was brutal. While Wilson was clanking shot after shot, her teammates and the referees picked up the slack. Jackie Young was sensational, scoring 25 and hitting daggers whenever Indiana dared to rally. Chelsea Gray added 15 steady points, and the rest of Vegas chipped in just enough to keep the margin safe. But make no mistake, this wasn't dominance. It was survival. It was a team being carried across the finish line by whistles and luck. And still, when the media recapped the game, Wilson somehow became the story. Her poor shooting was spun as tough defense. Her struggles reframed as resilience. Analysts praised her impact beyond scoring, pointing to rebounds and blocks as though they erased the brickfest that nearly cost her team the game. Meanwhile, Aaliyah Boston, the real defensive hero, was barely mentioned. Because here's the truth the headlines ignored: Boston was spectacular. Possession after possession, she forced Wilson into bad angles, contested everything without fouling, and dictated the paint. When a league MVP shoots 30%, it's not coincidence, it's a clinic. Boston played flawless positional defense, and the only reason Wilson survived statistically was because officials kept bailing her out. Even Vegas's coach, Becky Hammon, joined the theater, complaining that Wilson only shot 1 free throw in 38 minutes. It was tone-deaf at best, manipulative at worst. The Aces had been gifted free throws all series, living at the line every night, yet somehow, the narrative became that they were the victims. Through it all, The Fever never stopped competing. They held leads, fought through whistles, and refused to play the victim. But as the final buzzer sounded and Vegas escaped with another suspicious win, something inside Stephanie White broke. This wasn't just another loss. This was an insult. She'd watched her players fight like warriors, Hull sacrificing her back, Boston battling through contact, Kelsey Mitchell taking hits that would make anyone wince, only to have it all stolen. When she faced the microphones again, she didn't mince words. Her voice wavered, but her message was crystal clear. "The disrespect for our team has been unbelievable," she said. "And it's disappointing." White's demand for a league-wide investigation wasn't about one game. It was about months, maybe years, of frustration boiling over. About watching calls mysteriously favor certain teams, certain stars, certain brands. About realizing that no matter how well her players executed, they weren't just playing 5 opponents on the court. They were playing 7. Her courage resonated across the basketball world. Because she wasn't just standing up for her team, she was standing up for fairness. For the young fans watching at home, for the players.